Welcome. My name is Nicole Lindstrom, and I am here tonight with Lead with Love to guide you through a heart-centering experience. So if you will accept my invitation, I invite you to put anything that you're holding down and stand up. Perfect, yes, great arm length. And we'll begin by finding our feet. So if you would, look at your feet, pick up your left foot, pick up your right foot, press both of your feet down, and then lift your 10 toes. And as you lift your 10 toes, I'd like you to raise up your kneecaps, press your tailbone towards the earth, soften your navel, and then reach your heart center towards the sky. Drop your shoulder blades down your back, soften your elbows, soften your jaw, and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Exhale out through your mouth. Now hold your palms open, and with your eyes closed, feel your left palm. Now your right palm. Now feel both of your palms at the same time. What do you feel? And then open your eyes just a little bit, but not very wide, and let's begin to shake the hands. Shake your elbows, shake your shoulders, get down into your knees, back into the feet. See if we can get a little back and forth, and then maybe bounce. Yes, here we go. And then feet ground back down, lift your 10 toes, lift your kneecaps, drop your tailbone, sternum to the sky, shoulder blades down your back, and shake your palms. Okay, hands open again, close your eyes, feel your left palm. Feel your right palm. Okay, what do you feel? Maybe a slight buzzing, tingling, a sense of being alive in your body. And then take your right hand, place it on top of your heart. Place your left hand on top of your right hand. Feel your hands. Feel your heart. And feel your breath. And connecting to your heart, feeling that pulsation, pumping blood and oxygen through your body, I'd like you to take a deep breath in, full breath out. Okay, now imagine, and go with me here, tapping into your creativity. Imagine that your heart has eyeballs, okay? And now I'd like you to open your heart eyeballs and open your real eyeballs and take a moment to look around as though you are looking through the eyes of your heart. So you can look up, look down, look left, look right, acknowledge where you are. Okay, where are you in time and space? What is this place that you are standing in? Who are you with? And as you look, just notice how precious this moment really is. We are together, we are outside. It is such a gorgeous, beautiful evening. Seeing with the eyes of your heart. Now, again, come back to center, close your eyes. You can feel your heart. You can feel there's, in that gratitude, in that appreciation of this present moment, there's a physical feeling. Feel it. Feel this moment in your heart. And now imagine that your heart has ears. And keeping your eyes closed, open the ears of your heart and listen. Listen. What do you hear? Cherish this moment. And opening the heart, preparing yourself to fully see, fully hear the stories of tonight. Let's take a deep inhale again. Full exhale. slowly open your eyes. Welcome back, and let's begin.
Hello, story lovers. I'm Emily Taylor from the Aspen Center for Environmental Studies. To everyone here in person and also those tuning in at home, I'd like to extend a warm welcome from Rock Bottom Ranch here in Colorado's Roaring Fork Valley.
And I'm Laura Whitley from CORE, the Community Office for Resource Efficiency. And together we are very excited to co-host the third annual Roaring Stories. This evening of art and action has been brought to you by 5 local nonprofits: CORE, ACES, KDNK, Writ Large, and new this year, Lead with Love, including Nicole, who led us in the meditation.
We're very fortunate to have some incredible partners who are making possible this evening of true stories told by locals.
Roaring Stories is sponsored by an incredible crew of in-kind donors: Aspen Daily News, Aspen Public Radio, the Aspen Times, Colorado Audiovisual and Design, Grassroots Network, and Marble Distilling Company.
And special thanks to our live stream sponsor, Charles Cunniff Architects. Please join us in giving our sponsors a round of applause. Laura, do you remember when we started on this journey 3 years ago with an idea for storytelling at Rock Bottom Ranch, putting stories to work for our climate?
I do. You and I share a special love for storytelling series. From The Moth to Alia Howe's Writ Large series, we know that stories have the power, are a superpower. And so maybe that's why you're here tonight. Whether you're tuning in from your couch at home or you're seated at a straw bale table here at the ranch, you understand that stories have the power to touch hearts, moving us to empathy and to action.
We knew this, but we didn't have proof.
We didn't have proof.
Not the kind of proof that you could put in a spreadsheet.
We didn't have any proof.
Or a peer-reviewed scientific magazine.
No proof.
But now we do.
We do. Tell them.
Yale University, you've heard of them, right? They just published a study about stories and climate change. They start with the position that engaging people in climate change can be very, very difficult because people view it as distant and abstract and impersonal. So climate change seems far away, and we just don't hop to. We knew that, right?
We knew that.
But here's the thing. Yale's study demonstrates that stories are the disruptor that can move us to action. Personal stories about the effects of climate change may lead an audience, people listening on KDNK, people watching on our live stream, people in the pole barn, that's you, to identify with the storytellers and vicariously experience those impacts, which can have positive and powerful influences on how we view and act on climate change.
Wow, positive, powerful influence on how we act and view climate change. So we have proof. Stories are a superpower. And that bodes very well for our secret agenda, doesn't it, Emily?
That's true, it's true.
In case you were wondering, we have an ulterior motive. We are here to move you tonight.
Are you excited? Laura, do you want to tell them what they're in for?
The climate of love?
That's it.
Yes. Climate of Love is our theme for the night, and the prompt that our 6 storytellers have been working with since August 6th. They were the very first cohort of storytellers to participate in our brand new 4-week masterclass in storytelling.
Here's the theme. Have you ever fallen in love with a place the same way that you've fallen in love with a person? Have you ever seen it change before your eyes? Maybe because of climate change. What happened next?
For many of us, there will be, if there hasn't already been a defining moment when climate change hits you in the gut. It could be a split second. It could be a dawning realization. It could be the wildfires that have burned in our state and are burning right now in California, Oregon, and Washington. It could be a story you hear on the stage tonight. Whatever the source, the thing we're curious about is this. When climate change became real for you, What did you do next?
I can't wait to find out what our storytellers did next. Let's introduce our story master, Alia Howe, who will take us on this journey. Alia Howe is a UK-born dance and performance artist. She has danced for some of America's greatest companies, taught at the State Ballet School in Greece, the Laban Institute, and the Lincoln Center Institute in New York City. She moved to the Roaring Fork Valley to raise her daughter and founded under Alia's umbrella, which for 10 years has produced the Writ Large storytelling series. Alia's work has been featured by many local organizations, including 5 Point Film Festival, Thunder River Theater, Wilderness Workshop, CORE, Response, English in Action, the Wheeler Opera House, and The Temporary. Alia is thrilled for Writ Large to be part of Roaring Stories, creating a community narrative about what is meaningful to us, and partnering with organizations that show us all here and at home tonight how to take action.
Alia, over to
Alia.
you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here in person, live streaming, and on Facebook. It's a thrill to be part of this Roaring Stories and to be in our third year partnering with such incredible organizations that have such an impact in the Valley. But I want to tell you a little bit about Writ Large, and it exists in part because we humans are a storytelling species. I believe a community with no narrative to tell doesn't survive as a community. And in these times, having a heartfelt narrative story makes all the difference for an individual, a family, a community, and a country. Developing a strong narrative, a really strong narrative, is the secret that holds us together, making us effective, resilient, and happy. Glossophobia. That was a new word for me when I first started doing storytelling, and it's the fear of public speaking. And I didn't realize how high public speaking as a fear ranks as human terrors. And so I just want you to know that for these storytellers here tonight, this is an act of immense courage. And I have sat over the last couple of months in the privilege, bathing in the privilege of working with them, holding their stories as a treasured gift, which I hope you will, because sharing a true story, something vulnerable from your heart or meaningful, is for me more valuable than anything material. It's a gift from the heart. So before we begin, I want to speak about your role. It will keep you warm as the sun goes down. It's about audience participation. I would like you please to respond to the storytellers, to laugh, to cry, to clap, to moan and groan, and just let yourself respond and react spontaneously with childlike freedom. And just because I know that glossophobia is a #1 fear, I imagine audience participation might be another one. So let's practice. Let's practice really easily with a simple thing like clapping your hands. Let's applaud. Can you add a few whoops to that? Whoop, whoop! Now could you groan? Oh. And then maybe, if it takes your breath away, you just touch your heart. So, I have more to say always, but I'll add that a little bit later on. I think I want to bring us up and get the night moving with our first storyteller. Our first storyteller, Olivia Neosi, grew up in Oregon with hippie fish scientists on one side of her family and a rural homestead ranchers on the other. As wildflowers, drought, endangered fish, and tense family gatherings started to hit closer to home, Olivia left. She left to study environmental science at Loyola University in Chicago, and Olivia now works as an ACES naturalist and lives at the Aspen Center at Toklat. And if you haven't been to Toklat, I'm sure after hearing this story, you're going to need to ask for directions. Toklat was built in 1948 by Stuart and Isabel Mace, passionate craftsmen, women, foodies, and conservationists. If you haven't been, she, like I, encourages you to come up and take a nature tour with her and hear how hear all about how the Mace family has impacted the Roaring Fork Valley. Let's make a lot of noise for Olivia, our first storyteller. We have hand sanitizing practices and protocol coming in, dressing the mic.
So one July evening at my new home, Tokwat, we hosted a fire and invited heroes in the art and the environmental community of the Roaring Fork Valley up to celebrate and get to know Tokwat legend Eddie Runningwolf. Eddie is an amazingly talented woodcarver and painter, and his story kind of started at Tokwat. Back when he was about my age, early 20s, Stuart found him and took him to Tokwat, where he had him under his wing, and he helped challenge and push Eddie to perfect his art. Eddie told how Stuart Mace never really gave him a full thumbs up. He was always critical, and that constant criticism and constant customers is what helped Eddie help find his voice through his art. Eventually, Eddie got to the point where Stuart Mace was giving him his most prized woods, endangered wood all the way from Haiti, big maple burls from a family that lived off a school bus. Eddie was so grateful to Tokwat and the Mace family for helping him. At this fire, the other people, those other heroes, shared similar sentiments to Eddie on how the Tokwat had helped them in their great careers. Tom and Jody Cardamone were there, and they told how Stuart Mace's daring charisma helped encourage them to take risks with aces in its early years. Dale Will talked about how he battled to protect the Ryan parcel just next door to Tokwat, and in doing so ensured that the upper Castle Creek Valley would be safe from further development. Elena, a master weaver from Oaxaca, Mexico, talked about how much her village has benefited from selling rugs up at Tokwat for over 30 years. All of these people had accomplished so much, and all of them were sharing how this building that I now called home had been so instrumental in their great careers. And then there was me. I had lived there for 1 month and 1 week, and I gave free 45-minute nature tours on top of Aspen Mountain. So, yeah. I felt pretty out of place, it's fair to say. But, you know, it's interesting. Everyone that has ever come to Tokwat and has been touched by that place and remembers their experience with immaculate detail. They will come to me and they will tell me a 2-minute to 2-hour story about that one time when they were 10 and Stuart took them on the dog sleds and they had really good food in the 60s. And there's one detail that everyone remembers and everyone asks me about, and that question is, are the hanging tables still there? And the answer is yes, they're still there. I have breakfast and dinner there every day. I've gotten pretty good at cards on them too. And they're hanging tables. And they're hanging tables because Stuart Mace brought them back from Alaska because they were handy against 2 things. 1, mice, which we have a lot of up at the Caddo Center at Tokwat, especially right now. And they're really easy to take down and tuck away in tight spaces. And that's because they're just thin pieces of wood with large metal rods that hang on big nails that come out of the beams of Tokwat. But I didn't get a taste of their magic that everyone remembered until that night at the fire. We came inside. Elena made homemade enchiladas. She'd made me drive all the way down to Carbondale to get fresh corn tortillas and come to Rock Bottom to get fresh chicken. Ooh. Don't turn down Elena's enchiladas ever. They were so good. The first 20 minutes inside, the only thing you could hear was people scraping the enchilada off the plate to get as much off of that plate and into their mouth as they possibly could. But once we were all full, we kind of played a game like musical chairs. we sat around and had more casual one-on-one conversations with each other. And these heroes were asking me what my dreams were and what my story was. And all of a sudden, I felt this really weird feeling wash over me. And I no longer felt out of place. I felt like I belonged there. After this dinner, Eddie Runningwolf added me as a friend on Facebook, and we kept in touch, liking and commenting on my adventures and his art. And this made it really easy when he came in town in the winter to help us nature nerds curate the beautiful gallery that was in our home. And he really made me feel like I did belong in that cool I Was Changed by Tokwak club. Being in that club, it made me really love the place and the places around it. I started to love and care for the place so much that this past March and April, I made an Ashcroft neighborhood watch. Yeah. When lockdown came, Upper Castle Creek became just this lawless place. There were dogs running around, no owner in sight, chasing all the foxes and the ground squirrels that were popping up and down. There were snowmobiles ripping up and down the mountains. And on several occasions, I saw different elderly women poop next to my car. It was crazy, and I had to protect this place. So I made a homemade name tag, and I grabbed my lawn chair, and I sat up on the road closed sign up at mile 11 of Castle Creek Road, and I talked to people. I asked them how they were doing. Oh, what do you think summer's gonna look like? This will be over, right? Where are you going skiing? What are you up to? And we just connected. And by talking and connecting, I restored some peace and community up there. And it felt really good. And forming a neighborhood watch is pretty silly. But it was me taking a local action to protect a place that I had fallen in love with. And I fell in love with that place because of Eddie's story and because Eddie made me feel like I belonged there. When I heard that Eddie Runningwolf passed away from COVID-19 on August 5th, I promised that I would continue to share his story and my own story so that others can feel connected and like they belong. Because if there's one thing I've learned that my expensive conservation biology degree didn't teach me about climate change, it's that we need story for climate action. We need to feel connection. We need to love a place if we're going to be called to protect it. And the hardest part about climate change is we need more than little local actions and local leaders. We need global action and global leaders. And that's going to take some really powerful stories and really powerful mentors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for kicking the evening off. Keep making noise, please, audience. Keep making noise. Next up, we have Mike Boucher. He's a native New Yorker from the Bronx, not the other boroughs. He's a husband of one, father of three, brother of two. He's a skier, Telly and the other kind, a former ski patroller at Ski Widnam at A Basin. He's a cyclist, mountain and the other kind, a former racer, 0 wins in 7 starts. Former Colorado Outward Bound school instructor on the river and mountain programs. He's an energy warrior, working for CORE as the commercial programs manager and BPI analyst. Please let's put our hands together to welcome Mike Boucher up for his story on climate of love. Keep it going. He's not up here yet. Keep it going.
I'm not that tall. So, how did I get here? Right? I ask myself very frequently, and it wasn't when I took a solar class at SEI when they were in Carbondale. It wasn't when I took the job at CORE. Thank you very much, which is still pretty new for me. It was my daughter Joy who's got me here in front of the mic. And she had come to me one morning in early June, and I was working from home, like many of us had to. And she said, "Dad, are you paying attention to what's happening in Denver?" No, she was born in Denver, so I think that's the reason why she was bringing it up. "No, honey, what's happening?" She said, "They're shooting the Black Lives Matter protesters with rubber bullets and tear gas." And she says, it's not fair because when the anti-maskers went to the capitals in their states and they were armed with automatic weapons, they weren't met with this type of conflict. So, my first guttural response in my mind was, "I'm sorry, honey, that's just the way it goes. That's the way it is." And I felt badly that was my first instinctive response. But I know that's not what you needed to hear. So I asked her instead, "What do you want to do?" And she said she wants to demonstrate. And she wants to participate. And at the time, of course, I didn't realize something in me had shifted at that moment. So we made plans to go to Denver and participate. Yes! So we were getting ready and on our way. I pulled up some Angela Davis speeches. I pulled up some Malcolm X speeches. I got the Gil Scott-Heron track, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," and I sent it to a few folks. She really liked that, but I think many of those references were lost. We had music bumping, and she and I were going down the road just like this, listening to some hip hop, which is what we like to do together, among other things. And when we got to Denver, we picked up my other daughter, Justice. No coincidence, it was just circumstantial. That is really her name. Not Justin or Justine, it's Justice. And we went down to the Capitol, and I didn't know what to expect. What I didn't want was the chaos and the mayhem that they had been reading about and seeing on the computer. But what we saw were thousands of people peacefully gathered, standing in front of the Capitol, in front of shrines of people who had been killed. And they were young and they were old. They were single and couples and groups and organizations. They were white, black, Asian, Latino, and everything you can imagine. It was like a UN in Denver. It was pretty cool. So we wanted to get ahead of the group and get positioned for the speakers, which was at Civic Center Park. And when the speakers came up, I was surprised at how young they were and how powerfully they spoke and passionately and with clarity. They weren't talking about racism. They were talking about anti-racism and the power of our vote. And I was so thankful to experience this with my kids. joy and justice. And just taking in that whole scene, looking through the crowds, and it was very powerful for me, and it was moving. And when we left, you know, I was buoyed by this whole experience. I really was. And yet when I came back, you know, I returned here, and this is so far removed from what we had seen. So I'm going to work in my home office, and before one of these Zoom calls, I go out for a walk because it gets warm during the day, and I just need to get my walk on in the morning, had my earbuds in, listen to podcasts. And as I'm walking on the path, a young father is pushing a stroller, and he gets onto the path before me. And I didn't recognize him, but there's so many people here I don't recognize, you know? And we're walking, and I notice him looking over his shoulder. We keep walking, and I'm kind of closing the gap, and he's looking over his shoulder more frequently. And now he's got me doing it. So I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm looking over my shoulder. As I got closer, he pulls off the trail, and I walk by and I nod silently because I had my earbuds in and I didn't want to shout, "Good morning," to this guy I didn't know. But I walked by and he didn't even acknowledge me, didn't look at me, nothing, no reply. And I thought nothing of it, you know. Like I said, I didn't know this guy. So I'm walking, and I don't know, there was an itch, you know. I've heard the term earworm recently, and now I'm using that more than I should, but something was itching. I'm like, did that just happen? And did it happen here in Carbondale? That was weird. First I was surprised, then I was angry. And then I felt shame for being angry. I finished my walk and I got home. I was able to get on my call and finish out my day, but again, that itch just persisted. And I tried to share this story with my wife, who's here tonight, thankfully, and I couldn't. I started, you know, getting tight. And I just told her, I have to tell you another time. And, you know, I tried to put it off the next day. When I was finally able to get my story out, I wept. And my daughter and my wife, for 50-something years, I was holding it in, and they held me and just let me get it out. And it was that family climate of love that I can never take for granted. And each time I told my story to friends and colleagues, I was met with the same response, and I'm just so thankful. So tonight, I'm sharing my climate with you. Thank you.
shorten the mic just a little, the stand a little. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Joy. Thank you both. Our next storyteller, Elizabeth Briggerman, is informed through personal experience, and she has a goal, which is to create a foundation that financially bridges and supports individuals who are moving from a life-changing episode through a long-term healing process, so they can actually just focus on healing. Let's put our hands together and bring up Elizabeth Briggerman. Thank you.
My healing story. Okay. Tilt it up more?
Yeah, go in closer.
Okay. There? Snuggle. My healing story reminds me of the slow breakdown, but the hopeful healing of our planet Earth. Unbeknownst to me, I was born with malformed veins in my midbrain. It's called a cavitous malformation. It took 40 years for the warning signs to actually appear. I had my first brain hemorrhage, and it stopped me for a couple months. Unfortunately, I didn't grasp the severity of my health situation. I didn't slow down, stop, start taking care of myself. I just kept pushing through. Our planet has been giving warning sign after warning sign for many years. Slow down, stop, tread lightly, start taking care of the planet. Cut back on gas emissions. Don't use all the resources. Don't push the planet to a level of unsustainable. A year later, I had my second brain hemorrhage, still not grasping the severity of the situation. 3 years later, my warning signs reached a critical stage. So I underwent a emergency 16-hour brain surgery on my midbrain. Now, your midbrain is the motherboard for your body. When I came out of that surgery, I was paralyzed on the right side of my body. It's like a line down the middle of your body. I then started to grasp the severity of the situation. I stopped, literally. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, barely, and I definitely couldn't move my body very much. Our planet has been giving critical warning sign after critical warning sign. Cut back on gas emissions. Let's move to a critical stage of global warming, severe climate changes, severe and critical fires, hurricanes, tsunamis, melting glaciers. The list goes on. And 6 months ago, everyone on our planet stopped. COVID-19 and the lockdowns have created some, what I call, opportunities and positive influences on our planet. Species that were under duress are actually finally making a comeback. Sea turtles in the Bay of Bengal have returned to start laying eggs again. Cleaner air, cleaner water, 7% drop in our gas emissions on our planet. We had a 58% during March and April drop of animal vehicular collisions, which I'm sure you can all relate to here in Colorado, solely because we weren't on the road as much as we used to be. My body went through a huge reboot, literally. I believe our planet's doing the same thing. In my world, I call it an opportunity. Did you know that your brain and your body only heal when you're sleeping? I believe that's what's happening to our planet. All the changes and fabulous opportunities are actually coming out of COVID and lockdowns. So I'm sure it's hard to believe for some of you. What I went through, I'm so grateful. It's changed me forever. So I ask you, how will the past 6 months, the opportunity, change you? Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I imagine you're beginning to understand what an extraordinary adventure I've been on listening to the life journeys of our storytellers. They are powerful, they're revealing, they're deeply human. And now I want to just give you a little bit of a taster experience for one of the many ways that we all work together in workshop in developing stories and how we source stories and generate material. So I'd like you to think 3 short, very short, 3-sentence or even 3-word stories, and I'm going to give you a prompt. And I'll give you a little pause after the prompt to answer your question inside your head. You can memorize it, just like that. Have you ever fallen in love with a place in the same way you can fall in love with a person? Please name that place. Second sentence or word, how and why did it change before your eyes? So now you've got 2 sentences or 2 words. You have superpowers. How would you protect this place for 7 generations to come? You can get wild out of the box here. And I'll give you a quick example and then I'll review the sentences. For myself, when I named the place I'd fallen in love with, I immediately thought of a certain reservoir. How and why did it change before my eyes? Drought. I have superpowers. How would I protect this place for 7 generations to come? My superpower would whoosh through local and national governments, illegalizing green lawns in high desert communities. So one more time, so you can just anchor this story for this moment. It does not have to be the biggest story or the smallest story, just the one that came out of nowhere here. Have you ever fallen in love with a place the way you can fall in love with a person? Name the place. How and why did it change before your eyes? Breathe that one, please. Really see and how and the whys behind the change. And now you have superpowers, unlimited potential. How would you protect this place for 7 generations to come? Thank you. Someone will be reaching out to you at some point for your story. Maybe not even tonight. Now let's everyone stand up. It's beginning to get a little bit cool, so let's just shake out for a moment. I'll just shout, but shake your hands up high and bounce up and down on your toes. Then go to the side, and then take it into your hips a little bit side and side. And then running on the spot. Inhale your arms up, and just a big, huge ha out. Ha. One more time. Inhale up, and ha. Get back in your seat. So I love this relationship with these organizations because we have storytellers standing up here tonight for a stable climate to protect our resources, to save energy and cut carbon emissions, be engaged citizens, and share their stories about climate change, whether it's our inner climate or our outer climate, and our love of place. And we have 3 more storytellers for you. Our next storyteller, who drove up from Boulder, is Sydney Macy. And when I got her bio, I was like, holy smokes. She is a 4th-generation Coloradan with deep roots in this state. She grew up on the edge of her grandparents' farm in the country south of Denver. From her home, there was a full view of the Colorado's magnificent mountains. Open space and open views were formative for Sydney. Sydney and her family spent a lot of times in the mountains, including Aspen, where they had a lovely home for over 50 years in the West End. She grew up skiing in Aspen and has hiked and camped all over this area. Sydney attended Stanford University and designed her own major in environmental studies since they didn't exist in the 1970s. After graduating, she immediately landed a job at the Nature Conservancy in San Francisco, and for a number of years worked all over the West. Eventually, she returned to Colorado and served as the Conservancy's first woman state director until 1993. A year later, she joined the Conservation Fund, where she led fund efforts across the West, with most of her land work focused on Colorado. During Sydney's 40-year career in land conservation, she has completed hundreds of projects which have resulted in the protection of thousands of acres in land in Colorado and the West. Wow. Sydney recently completed an 18-month fellowship at Stanford in the Distinguished Careers Institute. While there, she developed a keen interest in writing and storytelling. Sydney is married to Tom Macy, also a lifelong conservationist. They live in the mountains west of Boulder with full view of the Indian Peaks. They are both athletic and active and enjoy hiking and bicycling, swimming, skiing and fly fishing. And God, let's make a warm welcome for Sydney and her huge drive up here to be with us tonight. Oh! Thank you, Sydney. I'm sure this is going to be a comedy skit at some point. Thank you, Sydney, for coming up.
My mother is tucking my sister and me into bed and whispering a secret to both of us. Tomorrow we get to skip school and ride the train to Colorado Springs. We're both so excited. It seems like it takes hours for us to get to sleep. My sister was 6, I was 9. When I get to play hooky with my brothers and sister, it is one of the best days of the year. Boarding the Denver Zephyr at Union Station, we make a mad dash to claim the coveted seats in the Vista Dome, an elevated car with no ceiling, just a giant bubble of glass. As the train pulls out, we're glued to our seats with our heads bobbing like periscopes, swiveling to take in every bit of the countryside. The South Platte River is running strong and free, full of icy snowmelt. The cottonwoods are raining puffs into the sky. As we continue our journey south, the land inches higher while the views open up. We enter a magical landscape of rolling grasslands, prehistoric buttes and mesas, and praying women hoodoos. The train roars through the Greenland town site, labors up and over the divide, and descends to the springs. The Palmer Divide is a cap rock break that runs 80 miles out into the Great Plains. It is here where the waters part, going south into the Arkansas and then to the Gulf, going north into the Platte, the Missouri, and the Mississippi. To the Ute, who left behind their sculpted prayer trees in the vanilla-infused ponderosa forests, the land was sacred. To me, the divide is a place of convergence, a place that beckons, a place where my past would become my future. It is where sheets of snow stall and dump giant drifts on the Greenland Ranch, which some say is named for its likeness to the frozen island, not for its verdant summer grasses. 10 years later, coming home from college for Christmas, I am glued to the windows of the airplane, smiling and brimming with excitement. The day is classic Colorado, brilliant blue skies and glorious snow-drenched peaks. It is the early 1970s, not long after the infamous brown cloud began to smother Denver. As we descend over the peaks, we drop into a thick soup of black smog, choking the city. Everything I know has been swallowed by that dirty air. Tears are streaming down my cheek, and I know in that moment that my life's work will be devoted to protecting my beloved home. I think I'm gonna sit down. Sorry, a few back problems. Thank you. Is that good? The Greenland Ranch is the oldest operating cattle ranch on Colorado's Front Range, which runs from Cheyenne, Wyoming to Pueblo, Colorado. 80% of the state's population lives between Denver and the Springs in an area mostly defined by the Interstate 25 highway corridor. Greenland Ranch bridges these two cities and lies at the south end of Douglas County, one of the fastest growing counties in America since the 1990s. When I first traveled through this land on the Zephyr, the population of Douglas County was 5,000. Today, it is 350,000. In 1977, the family that had owned the Greenland Ranch for almost a century put it up on the market for sale. 11,000 acres for $11 million. Some of you might remember State Treasurer Roy Romer challenging the state to buy the land and ensure that Denver and the Springs would never grow together. But instead, investors from Oklahoma City purchased it and started to expand the property. Romer's plea got my attention. It was the same year I began my work with the Nature Conservancy in Colorado, negotiating deals to buy land and protect it. I was told in order to succeed, to not become attached to the land. Remain arm's length, no emotion, no love for the land, just do the deal. Many of my Conservancy colleagues would never visit a place for fear of developing that bond. But Greenland was the landscape of my childhood. It was already a part of me. And I felt a deep obligation to make sure that that land wasn't scarred with cul-de-sacs and shopping malls and office towers. The negotiations to purchase the Greenland Ranch were extremely complex and took nearly a quarter of a century to complete. We formed a lot of partnerships. We raised a lot of money. We had a lot of luck. And yes, there was a lot of emotion. And in the year 2000, we finally bought the Greenland Ranch and protected it. By that time, it was 21,000 acres and encompassed 8 miles of the interstate. We did a bunch of other deals in that area for a grand total of over 35,000 acres and 12 miles of the highway protected. Denver and Colorado Springs will never grow together. Every day, 80,000 cars drive this stretch of highway. The traffic is usually stopped. People in the cars don't see the protected landscape. They're on their phones, they're sending texts, they're receiving emails, and they're not paying attention. Their children in the back seats, hidden by darkened windows, look like hooded monks bowing down to their screens, or like disciples peering up to heaven to watch the mounted televisions as the landscape slips by. Today, the trains that travel the tracks of my childhood begin in Wyoming's Powder River Basin, where 110 open train cars are identically loaded with coal, resembling a string of black mounded graves. They are headed to coal-fired power plants in the Southwest to cool homes in the Sunbelt. It is a funeral procession. Endless black hearses commanding the right-of-way and never stopping. The trains are stopped on the tracks next to the freeway, and traffic in both directions is stalled, idling, sitting, spewing fumes into the atmosphere. I have finally reached my exit, where I will go into the solitude of the Greenland Ranch. My plan is to hike the Rimrock, a favorite haunt of bighorn sheep. Peering into my rearview mirror, I can see into the SUV behind me. The western sun has illuminated the family inside, who are all immersed in their screens. As I begin to exit, I imagine motioning them to follow and join me on my solitary hike. We start off on a faint game trail with elk bugling below us and the still gridlocked highway on full display in the distance. We leave the trail and walk through tawny, tall grass, and we enter a large grove of oak brush in its full fall splendor. As we near the cliffs, still hidden by the oak, we are rewarded. 8 bighorn rams in all their glory, regal sentries presiding over this protected land. The bighorns scatter. We settle ourselves onto boulders on the cliff edge to watch the sunset. The coal train has started to slowly move south. Traffic in both directions is beginning to inch along. As dusk descends, we leave our perch and head back to our cars on a dirt road. We walk in silence. Everything is quiet, except for the distant, mournful cry of the train as it lumbers up and over the divide. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you stay sitting, Sydney? I just want you to stay sitting. And I also want to just tell you about some of Sydney's work here in the valley. Her first land deal for the Nature Conservancy was the acquisition of the North Star Ranch east of Aspen in 1978. You can start applauding. She worked closely with the owner, James Smith, and the ranch was purchased for $850,000. While with the Conservancy and the fund, Sydney and Tom Macy helped acquire and preserve land in Hunter Creek and at Ashcroft. They also completed the protection of the land from Highway 82 up and over Watson Divide and led the effort to place a conservation easement on the Capitol Creek Ranch owned by the Childs family. Sydney's last deal in this area was the protection of the sagebrush meadow on the Aspen Meadows property, now called Amy's Meadow. Thank you, Sydney, for your work in the valley. Oh. And as we deepen into the evening, we now have Gabrielle Ray Raffelson. She is in the midst of reinventing herself and truly looks forward to the next chapter. Let's welcome the next chapter for Gabrielle on stage, standing up and sharing a story.
I'm 25, working in the script department of Carolco Pictures on Sunset Boulevard. You can thank that production company for giving you those fabulous Rambo films of the early 90s. But they did fund a few lower budget, more artistic films. And that's where I meet him, the director, the man who swept me off my feet and brought me to this incredible valley. He pursued me for weeks, calling me at 1 or 2 in the morning, telling me crazy stories of his life. Then he called on a Friday night and said, "I've cooked dinner for 2. It'll be ready in 20 minutes. And he hung up. So I drive on up to those Hollywood Hills. I eat a good meal. I listen to him play a song on the piano. We spend the next 6 years traveling the globe on adventurous experiences, falling in love. And then my biological clock starts to tick. And I think it's either time to have a child with this man or it's time to move on. Did I mention he's 33 years older than I am?
Not yet.
It presents a few issues, of course, like me being mistaken for his daughter countless times, but we seek advice from a therapist named Lolita. We discuss what it might be like for a man his age to create a second family, what he may be willing to sacrifice or not for this. And at the end of a few sessions, he says, "I don't need any more therapy. I've made up my mind." So we have a child. And he says, we're going to raise the child in his house in Aspen. I'm pregnant a week later. Four years later, I'm pregnant with our second child. And I say, I need better medical insurance. So we go down to the Pickens County Courthouse and sign those marriage papers. And there I am, this city girl, this girl who would really rather roam the halls of any museum than hike in these daunting mountains, let alone ski on them. But I'm in love. I'm living a fantasy life in the Castle Creek Valley with a giant rolling lawn and 2 beautiful boys. And I fall in love. I fall in love with the changing seasons here. I mean, in LA, it's either hot or hotter, and fire season or mudslide season. But here, watching those aspen leaves tumble along the grass and the wildflowers in those mountainsides, and I even fall in love with that white fluffy snow. We plant a vegetable garden where lettuce and mint flourish. We set up a badminton court and a trampoline for the boys and the occasional bear to enjoy. But wild animals do not respect boundaries, and neither do wild men. The porcupines start to come down from the mountainside, and they scrape away at the siding of our house. I guess they like the salty taste of old painted wood. The beavers chop down more trees by the waterside before I can get the wire wrapped around it. A mountain lion appears at the edge of the grass. I watch that babbling creek turn into a raging river and spew over its borders, covering our lawn during its historic 100-year flood. The boys and I scramble, try and get sandbags to the door to keep that water from coming in. And then the moose. The moose moves in. She claims that lawn as her own. She sleeps there. She charges at the house. She terrorizes me as I run to and from the car. The winters, they start to grow longer and lonelier. And I grow colder while battling breast cancer. The inside, all I hear is the bellowing voice of my husband. And on the outside, those damn geese won't stop squawking and shitting all over the lawn at 6 a.m. I can't control nature, and I certainly can't control that wild man. But I can pack my suitcase. So at the age of 50, after dropping our older son off at college in California, I move out. I go back there now, 3 years later, many times to help the man that swept me off my feet. He's family, and I don't want that responsibility to fall solely on our other teenage son. But when I pull up there and I look at that vast wilderness that once held so much hope and so much joy, and I see now a field of broken dreams, I see holes left there from the underground moles. I see the torn and tattered trampoline. I see the trees that now need to be chopped down because of the infestation of the spruce bark beetle. And I think about those wildfires that are raging across my home state of California. And I feel overwhelmed. And I feel insignificant, as I'm sure so many of us do right now. But when I start to drive up that driveway, I do feel a sense of hope, a little glimmer, because I will find a new lawn where I will plant a new garden, and lettuce and mint will definitely flourish, and I will vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. So cool. Woo! Ow, ow! And closing out this evening, we have Gwen Garcellon. She is a strategic advisor to individuals and organizations committed to the well-being of people and planet. With a background in human development, her expertise is in building cultures capable of delivering evolutionary contributions. Her current area of focus, or areas of focus, are regenerative local food systems and helping architectural firms to embed sustainable design into their operations. She's also a lifelong skier who in high school was the state of Maine ski meister, the combined Nordic and Alpine girls champion. Let's put our hands together to bring up our last storyteller this evening, Gwen Garcellon.
It's my senior year of college, and I don't go to one job interview. I know I want to go west and ski the big mountains, so I head to Crested Butte, and I spend 5 years as a ski instructor, spend all my winter days on the mountain, either working or exploring the steeps of the North Face and the head wall. And it's insanely challenging and fun, and I get shown new depths of my ability. Crested Butte teaches me how to deeply know a mountain and the pleasures of that intimacy. I'm in my early 20s, and I'm meditating and taking time for retreats with my spiritual teacher. But my soul is looking for something it hasn't yet found. So I leave the mountains, and I spend a year living at my teacher's ashram. Taking that plunge into my spiritual development finally opens me to the depth of love that I've been so hungry for. A love so fully part of me that I'm no longer without it. And then the mountains beckon me back. And it's June 6th, 1993, 6 months after I moved from the ashram to Aspen. And I tumble 150 feet down a ravine and off a 40-foot cliff into the rocks and fresh snowmelt of East Snowmass Creek. 90% of people die on the spot from just one of the injuries I sustain. A rupture of my aorta where it attaches to my heart. An actual broken heart. After each of my major surgeries, I'm not sure I'll make it, but I'm not afraid to die. Somehow my time at the ashram has me understand that there's no place to fall away to. It's all here. And my heart surgeon tells me if I survive that first year, my heart will be stronger than it was before. Years later, a mentor tells me, you have to let your heart break to make it porous enough to let in the sorrows and the joys of the world. So I've always really treasured my broken heart. Over the next decade, I start skiing Aspen Highlands with my friend Stacy, who becomes dear sister to me. Her mad telly skills blow me away, and she knows the mountain like the back of her hand, and she infuses all that passion into me. We eventually have a standing date, and we ski so many Fridays together, and powder days, of course. We're like kids in a candy shop, exploring the new terrain as more and more of the Highland Bowl opens. Like Crested Butte, it becomes a mountain I start to know intimately. I ski its many angles over and over and know how they respond to the sun and the wind and where the best lines are at different times of day and different temperatures and how long it takes to ski a certain trail so I can get to the lift before it closes and get in one more run. But with Highlands, I'm building a connection of mutual trust and celebration. Our bond is alive, and I start to experience the indigenous relationship to the land as all my relations, the kinship. During these years, I break off 2 engagements with beautiful loves in my life. And yet the mountain remains, and I start to realize has become a huge love of my life. It's so surprising when this eventually sinks in. I hadn't considered it possible to have this kind of relationship with a place. Climate starts to really weigh on me during this time, climate change and everything happening. Every winter seems precious and I savor them. Even the 2 winters when the kids are babies and I'm just getting a handful of days on the mountain each year. Each day seems unbelievably full, and I think if this is my last day skiing, I'll be complete. And yet I long for the next one. It's 2013, and that summer I'm visiting the East Coast with my kids. And I pick up a publication in a coffee shop, and there's an article by a local psychologist, and it's called Gratitude for Beauty Lost. In it, he talks about grief as a big yes to the people and places we've loved so dearly, and the sadness we feel, like the ultimate act of vulnerability and connection. And this quote, "When we are awed by the beauty we encounter, there is magnificence, because the illusion of division between the human and the non-human world dissolves, and we stand blessed in remembrance of our true nature, interconnected and one with all." And that's it. That's how I feel about in my love of this singular mountain. In the past few years, I experienced my time on the mountain as prayer. In my weekly ritual and discipline of doing the 45-minute hike to 12,950 feet from the top of the lift to the top of the Highland Bowl, it's a pilgrimage. And skiing down, I allow myself to surrender to my lover. And in that exquisite presence, I'm held and I'm free, and my creative expression just flows through my skiing, and I feel just blessings generating from my whole being. It's this state of grace that feels like one of the most profound offerings I'm making with my one precious life. More and more, this experience of living prayer on the mountain has found its way into other areas of my life, especially when I'm in my gift in service to wicked problems like regenerating a local food system or aligning the operations of a national architectural group around sustainable design, or helping my 13-year-old navigate online learning. When I bring a posture of prayer to whatever I'm engaged with, it evokes the fertile ground for the miraculous. And this has been the priceless gift of my love story with a mountain.
Before we close out the evening, bringing the performers up to take a final bow so you can just revisit all the journeys you've been on, I would love to bring back Nicole Lindstrom from Lead with Love, and she's going to help us make sense of this, I think.
Close your eyes again. And with your eyes closed, bring your awareness to your mind and your thoughts. What are you thinking about? And as you reflect on your experience of this evening, what do you remember? What did you see? What did you hear? What touched you and impacted you? Is there anything that you experienced that you would like to remember always? Commit that to your memory now. And then from the mind into your heart, go back into the seat of your heart like we started. And as you tune into that pulsation, notice the difference in physical sensation. Your heart is wide open. And in the seat of a wide open heart, I have a question for you. When did you first become aware of Mother Earth? Can you remember when you awakened to our planet? When did climate change you? When did climate change you? And now feel what you feel. What do you feel? What feelings are present, emotional or physical? Now stay in your feeling body, stay in your heart, and pay attention to your mind and your heart as I ask you this next question. When did you change the climate? When did you change the climate? What does that look like? And be very, very specific here. As the actions, the ideas, the thoughts begin to stream forward into your consciousness, what ignites you? What lights you up? What are you willing to do to change the climate? And how does that make you feel? And then from actions of change into the present moment, again, just open the eyes of your heart and take a look around. Opening your eyes and noticing how the visuals are slightly different from when we started. What's different? What do you see? Looking around, do you see anything now that you didn't see before? Is anything new? Is anything brighter? And then tuning into the ears of your heart, what do you hear? Seeing, hearing, and feeling the preciousness of this moment of being interconnected together, of sitting in silence together, deeply rooted into the center of the heart, in this moment that is precious and so fleeting. And then for a community exhale, let's take a deep inhale through the nose. Full exhale out through the mouth.
So let's put our hands together, please, to bring back up on stage in program order, Olivia, Mike, Elizabeth, bravo. Sydney, Gabrielle, bravo, and Gwen. And taking us home this evening, let's bring up Laura Whitley. Thank you, Laura.
And a big thank you to Alia. On behalf of CORE and ACES and Lead with Love and Writ Large and KDNK, I'm just so glad you could all join us tonight. Whether you tuned in on KDNK or Grassroots TV or here at the ranch, we're thrilled to have you. And when you are ready to take your next step into climate action, we're ready to join you. So please come seek us out. Good night, and thank you.
Good night, and thank you.